Good morning, my dear students. I'm Sister Concelia. Now I'm going to begin the lesson. Before I just begin the second chapter, I'm going to summarize what I have done in my first recording. Teachers need to realize that there is no one approach and attitude that can suit all learners at each stage of learning. Especially in the case of young learners, a child may have his or her own pace of language development. Teachers must also be aware that the emotional development encompasses learning and understanding about feelings, emotions, comprehending how both occur, as well as recognizing feelings of self and others, thus developing the ability to manage them. Then we also saw this, the children's action, communication, sharing, and cooperating skills. The development of morality in that chapter we saw is also a concern while teaching young learners. We see boys and girls display different judgment in deciding what is right and what is wrong. Starting language learning is fun for the young ones as it provides a wonderful experience. Then we saw the advantages of learning language at a young age are having better understanding of the language, gaining advanced reading skills, boosting one's self-confidence, gaining greater opportunities for college, improving intellect, bigger view of the world and learning other cultures. Then as teachers, now we consider where they apply their new knowledge and experiences in order to understand the basis of teaching language to young children. Language instruction is clearly for an 8-year-old child, and it is audience using keywords, pictures, demonstrations, and sometimes translation into their mother tongue. Teaching language can be done by understanding the actions of the words, color, draw, and cut. Teachers now, as teachers, we saw that how they should in teaching the children they should first listen and watch and not just make them understand that not just repeat the language. In activities like making of the mobile, teaching and teacher can learn to help others in groups, talk about themselves, feel silly about them, and relaxed at the same time. Spider mobile activity can be exploited to teach body parts. Spider mobile activity, which I gave it you very elaborately, can be adopted to suit different age groups if the lesson is carefully planned. For effective teaching, teachers can reflect on their own learning experience as young children, what motivated and demotivated them in language learning. Let me now continue with the second lesson, understanding young children's language learning. Now let's see the perspectives on young children's language acquisition. There are many theories on young children's language learning. Four main views are discussed in the following sections. They are behaviorism, linguistic nativism, neurobiological perspective, and social interactions. First, we shall see the behaviorist perspective. The behaviorist views the idea that young children's language development is heavily influenced by the parents' teaching and the environment in which the child grows. This was the prevalent view throughout the first half of the 20th century. According to Skinner, he is the one who established this first theory, the behaviorist theory. Learning is the consequence of two basic processes. One is classical conditioning, other one is operant conditioning. What is classical conditioning? Behaviorists argue that classical conditioning brings about a receptive language. As an example, when a toddler is offered a ball and the father states the word ball, the toddler will learn to associate that the round object is always called a ball. Then the operant conditioning, on the other hand, is a technique of learning that happens by way of rewards and punishments as a result of specific behavior. For example, when a baby utters mama and gets a response from the joyful mother, such as a hug or a kiss, the baby will repeat the behavior. If this reward and punishment act continues to happen, the child learns to associate the word mama with the rewards. Or the punishment comes, then he will associate it with the punishment. We will see the second one, a neurobiological perspective. According to the nativist, innate language structure can facilitate the young child's own attempt to communicate. They also believe that the young child's environment does not have much influence on their language development. So neurobiological, what do they see? They facilitate the young child's own attempt to communicate. Neurobiological perspective. Neuroscientists argue that human brain cells known as neurons have the capacity to learn language. According to neuroscientists, certain brain areas are associated with the abilities to hear, speak, and interpret language. The human brain, therefore, already has structures for language. And we saw in our earlier topic how Chomsky, he had experimented and devised theory, language acquisition development. So that is what's called LAD. According to Sylvester, the language a young child acquires is associated with the language the young child is exposed to at home. If the child is exposed to a Sinhala environment, the child will learn whether he is a Tamil or a European, will learn Sinhala culture and Sinhala language. In another study, Kuhl stated, that is in 1993, that the brain of an infant is capable of understanding any 300 plus languages. So the child has the capacity to learn 300 plus languages. Three major findings of neuroscientists are: number one, infants are born with brains that have language functions. Number two, language learning is connected to aspects of genetics and environment parallel to views from the nativist, behaviorist, and social interactionist discussed in the following section. And number three, the language capacity of a child is dependent on the input quality of the language. That you will be able to see one author, Kotulak and Springer. Now we will see the social interactionist view. According to social interactionists, a young child's language learning is influenced by the teaching of the parents as well as genetics factor. The social interactionist argues that the environment influences a child's language development. According to Vygotsky, the Russian I told you earlier, the above example of support from adult or scaffolding facilitates the language growth of a young child within the proximal development zone. That is what young children can do with and without any assistance. That is proximal development zone. According to social interactionists, a young child's language learning is influenced by the teaching of the parents as well as genetics factor. The genetics we have already seen in the cognitive development. Number two, the social interactionist argues that the environment influences a child's language development. Having the innate predisposition to learn language, a child has the intention to participate in language learning and meaning construction. So you will find both social interactionist and nativist, the neurologists also finding, or these things find that the child, both are important, nature, nurture. So these are the factors. Nature is what the child has within himself, the capacity to learn. Nurture is the environment or what the stimuli that can offer, it reaches their child from the environment. These two are important in the learning of a language for a child of that age. According to this theory, an infant's verbal bout, that is verbal negotiations, with adults is important. The child has to converse with the adults as the young child attempts at speech as a meaningful and intentional activity. So we will see that in the coming figure, maybe in another one. There are several principles that all teachers need to understand in the process of teaching young children learn another language as follows. Teaching another language, that is a second language or foreign language, you may say um, language is a predictable sequence, number one. Number two, language is comprehended by understanding, then by expression. First by understanding, then by expression. Third, language is learned through social interchange. If the child doesn't talk, then he cannot talk. So we have seen the good child, we have read and we would have come to know, you would have known how the child only behaved like the bull. But when the child was brought to the human society, he could not. He behaved as a baby of the bull. Now, the fourth one. Young children learn an additional language according to its components. Principles behind the teaching of language for young learners. There are some principles which we have to observe. Phonemes. What is phoneme? Phonemes is a sound of a language. Now, when we were children, we were taught only the names, A, B, C, D, names, but we were not initially given the phoneme. But nowadays, the Montessori method and certain other methods, they give first the phonemes, the sound. The child is able to read. So, phonemes, lexicon is the vocabulary of a new language. Syntax is the word order. Then the morphemes is the word formations of a new language. In the morpheme, you will have different kinds of morpheme. And pragmatics, that is social meaning, how we express the social meaning. Then language is learned through imitation and practice. The child learns through imitation. Then next one is language is in the genes. And the last one is the critical age hypothesis asserts that a biologically predetermined time exists for learning language and the time is childhood. Educators of early childhood must accept their critical roles in providing a greater amount of language arts, modeling, and instruction than the parents because of the extended time young children spend in childcare settings. The child spends a lot of time in the Montessori, more than the child spends at home. The teacher must also recognize that when young learners of a second language discover a language that is very different from their own, they will feel uneasy to communicate with you using the learned language. So they will be little shy or little backward or little they were inhibited to express in their second language what they are learning, but they will do so in mother tongue. Thus, in addressing this issue, it is crucial for educators to comprehend how a young child acquires and learns a second language, as this assists in determining appropriate educational practices for young children. You will see in the picture now that's what I was telling. Factors influencing the rate of normal language learning. As language learning does not come naturally to the young child, the early childhood educators should recognize several factors that influence the rate of normal language production or development. You see the language learning factor, that is a center point. And now we see gender, the boys and the girls, male, female. Next one, socio-economic level. If the child is coming from the poor family, he will have a little backward in learning because the provisions in the environment offered rather poor, or maybe because of the money wise they cannot buy enough material for the child to learn at home. Second one, medical concerns. So if the child is really impaired in hearing or unable to see, so then there is medical concern. Third one is cultural influences. What are cultural influences? A Tamil child learning in Sinhala society, he will become a Sinhala, uh, he'll be more Sinhalese than a Tamil, because and he will learn that language, second language, very easily, because the environment offers stimuli on to that language. Likewise English, likewise Russian, any language that you would be introducing or the environment offers. Next one, the congenital language disorders. So you have, these are factors that you will have to, the principles, the factors that influence the rate of normal language development. Language fluency and proficiency is known to occur differently for boys and girls. For example, Karp and Namut in 1997 found that late talkers occur among boys more than girls. They talk later, not like the girls. Girls are, they speak first. Interestingly, research reveals that girls talk earlier than boys. Despite this, scholars still argue whether such a phenomenon is attributed to biological or social influences. In another research, Hart and Risley in 1995, this found that the rate of language acquisition between low and middle socio-economic families shows difference. Then the cultural influences is another factor that affects language learning. The last one is the one that we saw. The congenital language disorder will experience problems in learning the language. So the tips. The early childhood educators should provide opportunities for young children to practice their home language in the classroom, because immediately for them to learn and express the second language is very irksome for them. Parents and members of the community should be invited to participate in activities. Additionally, these volunteers should speak using the home language. So the parents and caretakers, those who come, they could speak to the children in home language. But in the classroom, the child learns the second language. Sufficient language support by the early childhood educator is an important part of young children's language learning. So enough of support should be given by the teacher. This includes providing gestures, visuals, physical modeling, repetition, as well as speaking in a clear tone and easy to understand words and phrases. Providing sufficient quality support to develop children's first and second language development is important. There are several factors that early childhood educators need to comprehend, which are below given. Number one, the language development in young children. The educators need to understand there's a specific period during which the child learns very fast. As we saw, 300 language the child can learn. B. Dual language development through intentional teaching activities and strategies. Preparation by the teacher. This is necessary. Third, similarities and differences between dual language development and monolingual language development. So the second language development and the mother tongue. That is what monolingual. Dual language means the second language. Being linguistically and culturally sensitive towards the classroom, teaching strategies, activities that are home-based activities, and educational materials. So the teacher has to be a little more sensitive. So what she can teach, the strategies, planning, everything is needed. Now, infants and toddlers. Childhood educators should also support the development of young children's language learning by promoting child-family interactions to create a rich, supportive language learning environment for the young children. The early childhood educator should also encourage parents to talk to their young children and create opportunities for their young children to experiment with a target language. What is target language? In the second language. Language fluency and proficiency is known to occur differently for boys and girls. For example, found that late talkers occur among boys that I have already read. And Hart and Risley found that the rate of language acquisition between low and middle socio-economic families shows difference. Young children from the low-income families are found to show a slower ability to use expressive language compared with children from the middle-income families, suggesting that social class differences may have an influence on young children's language development. The research also reveals that the children from professional families have more than 3 times linguistic input compared with children from lower income families. So the professional families' children will have more vocabulary than the children from the lower income families. This leads to young children from higher income families having more vocabularies compared with their friends from the lower income families. Cultural influences are another factor that affects language learning. For example, studies have shown that in some cultures, communication is done in non-verbal ways. Young children with congenital language disorders will experience problems in learning a language. Physical or neurological disorders include malformation of inner ear structures or poorly formed palate. So, for example, children who can't hear, impaired hearing, children who may not be able to use utter certain pronunciation or utter certain sounds. Problems of a neurological nature include dysfunction in the children's brain ability to pick out or interpret the language sounds. So any deficiency in the language area of the brain will be a hindrance for the child to pick up the sound. Preschoolers. During preschool, the early childhood educators may create programs that facilitate regular language modeling opportunities for children. This can be carried out as a classroom or home activity. Additionally, school staff should interact with the young children using the language of the young children. School staff may learn some words of the young child's home language to help ease young children's transition from home to school and assist low-level communication during the first few weeks of the children's school enrollment. I'm sure in Sri Lanka we have all these opportunities for us to learn. How children learn, the diplomat children coming to Montessori. I have had my experiences. How they learn Sinhala and the Tamil children who are in the society in the situation where European children, Sinhala children are there. They learn English and their way of acting and expressing. So it's quite natural for children. They pick up the language that is used in that environment. However, the teachers help the Tamil children sometimes to speak one word or 2 words of the Tamil so that they begin to ease out their anxiety. So this you will find. Likewise, the European children, the teacher may speak in English if they are learning Sinhala. If they are learning, the Sinhala children learning English, then she would say a few words in Sinhala for them to ease out initially. It is always initially until they get settled and their anxiety gets less. So we have just finished the second uh, chapter on understanding children.